Welcome to the Synthesis of Yoga, the book that changed my life. We are going through the book, the part, the Yoga of Divine Works, second chapter, Self-Consecration. And this is episode number 46. We are starting with the paragraph number 15. And in the description, you will find the link to this chapter, and I highly encourage you to start with this paragraph so that this reading and exploration can go together, we can travel together. In our previous episode, we saw how the specialized schools of yoga specializing in the path of liberation, uses exclusive concentration, picking up one particular faculty of consciousness and starve out everything else and leverage this exclusive concentration to ascend to the timeless existence, the divine consciousness, rejecting everything else. And this is not allowed in integral yoga, because in integral yoga, we embraces the whole complexity of human nature, where we saw that it includes not only our individual internal complex constitution with a lot of parts coming together, they are in conflict, almost chaotic, which is also opening to the larger collective existence, because in the individual we contain the whole universe. And in order to bring the transformation, harmonization of all the parts within themselves and among themselves, what we required is not an exclusive concentration, but an all-inclusive concentration. Though exclusive concentration has its place, but what we truly need is an all-inclusive concentration which takes up all things together. Now let's dive deep into this theme. Concentration is indeed the first condition of any yoga. But it is an all-receiving concentration that is the very nature of the integral yoga. All-receiving. It is not rejecting anything of inner world, outer world. Everything is received. So concentration is indeed the first condition of any yoga, but it is an all-receiving concentration that is the very nature of the integral yoga. A separate, strong fixing of the thought, of the emotions, or of the will on a single idea, object, state, inner movement, or principle is no doubt frequent need here also, but it is only a subsidiary helpful process. Our first training of concentration, what we do is taking the scattered mind, which is dispersed in the objects of senses, jumping from one thing to other. Whether it is senses jumping from one thing to other, the thought jumping from one thing to other, the heart moving from one thing to other, energies reacting to something or other, senses going after, all this are different threads of consciousness scattered. So in concentration, what we do is take them, gather them, and put on what a single idea or a single object or a single state or an inner movement or principle. And that is actually an exclusive concentration, but that's where we start. A separate, strong fixing of the thought, of the emotions, or of the will. So we can do that. A separate, strong fixing of thought, we can also do that of the emotions or of the will. 3 layers: thought, emotions, or the will. On a single idea, object, state, inner movement, or principle is no doubt a frequent need here also. a frequent need, because our normal state is of a dispersion, and we need to retrain ourselves to gather, mentally, emotionally, and our will. Everything is to be gathered, and that is a frequent training required. Is no doubt a frequent need here also, but this is only a subsidiary helpful process. It is a subsidiary helpful process. A wide, massive opening, a harmonized concentration of the whole being in all its parts and through all its powers upon the one who is all, is the larger action of this yoga, without which it cannot achieve its purpose. So the very purpose of integral yoga, if we are to achieve it, we need a different kind of concentration. We start with exclusive concentration, but then it has to move into a wide, massive opening. Opening, massive opening, wide, massive opening. What does it mean? Our consciousness has a tendency to shrink into the focal point of its concentration. From there, we must learn to widen it to include vaster and vaster dimensions, especially in all dimensions, upward, downward, so that we have a wide, massive opening in order to receive harmonized concentration of the whole being in all its parts and through all its powers. It's not only the mind that is gathered, emotions are gathered, the energy is gathered, the senses are gathered, the bodily physical action is gathered, everything is gathered, concentrated upon the one who is all. The entire existence, the manifold complex existence, behind it there is one reality, one being, one consciousness. It is upon that we put the entire being, the mental, vital, physical, all the layers, all the movements, everything is gathered and poured into the one who is all. Is the larger action of this yoga, without which it cannot achieve its purpose. So we have to gather all the parts of our being, mental layer, vital layer, physical layer, gather them all, concentrate, and then focus on that one who is all, and have a wide, massive opening for that one to pour in. Then we can have a transformation that we are aspiring for. Otherwise, it is not possible. For it is the consciousness that rests in the one and that acts in the all to which we aspire. It is this that we seek to impose on every element of our being and on every movement of our nature. The consciousness that rests in the one. There is a divine consciousness that is all permeating. It is resting in the one. That one being and its consciousness, when the consciousness is resting in that one being who is permeating all things and that acts in all, there is an omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent consciousness permeating the entire existence, and there is a consciousness that is resting in it, resting. It is not a turbulent movement. It is not a stressed, anxious activity running in 1,000 directions. It is resting in the one. Yet it is embracing all, acting through all. There is a movement of stillness and action at the same time. A dynamic stillness, a dynamic peace in action. It is that consciousness. It is the consciousness that rests in the one and that acts in the all to which we aspire. So we need to aspire for this consciousness that is all permeating and resting in it, in that oneness of divine consciousness. That is what we are aspiring for. It is this that we seek to impose on every element of our being, whether it is on our thoughts, our emotions, our energy, our senses, our body. All of them needs to be infused with this consciousness, this divine consciousness that is all permeating. And we have to really impose it on the individual elements, all the parts of our being which otherwise are restlessly seeking their own isolated pursuit. Mind is on its trail of knowledge. Heart is on its anxiety or its search for its affection and emotional intensity and affinities. Energy is seeking its own action. Senses are seeking their own pleasures. And body want to rest in peaceful, healthy condition. And all of them need to be imposed with this greater consciousness of the one, resting in the one. And that consciousness, when being brought in, then there's a possibility of each instrument refining themselves, finally harmonizing. For it is the consciousness that rests in the one and that acts in the all to which we aspire. It is this that we seek to impose on every element of our being, every element of our being, and on every movement of our nature, physical nature, vital nature, mental nature, every movement. It's a multi-layered movement. Into every movement, we are bringing in this one consciousness that is resting in that oneness, acting in all. That is what we are aspiring and bringing in. This wide and concentrated totality is the essential character of the sadhana, and its character must determine its practice. This wide and concentrated totality. The moment we talk about anything wide, we imagine it to be something dispersed, thin, scattered. No. Here, Sri Aurobindo is talking about a wide, concentrated totality. We are widening does not mean we are dispersed. Our tendency to relax is to disperse. It is perfectly possible to be absolutely at rest and relaxed without dispersing our energy. A gathered, peaceful rest. And we can also rest in action of thought, rest in the movement of heart and emotions. We can rest in the movement of energy in action in the world. We can rest in the movement of the senses seeking its pleasures. We can rest in the movement of the body. And we can be wide and all-inclusive, a concentrated wideness, all-receiving concentrated wideness. This wide and concentrated totality is the essential character of the sadhana. So this is the inner quality, inner movement of consciousness we need to cultivate. This is the very essential nature of the sadhana, and its character must define its practice. So the practices that we develop is coming from this. Its character must determine its practice. The character is this, a wide and concentrated totality. So if we have to arrive at that, we need to develop corresponding practices. But even though the concentration of all the being on the divine is the character of the yoga, yet is our being too complex a thing to be taken up easily and at once. as if we were taking up the world in a pair of hands and set in its entirety to a single task. We saw the complexity of our being. And the concentration required is an all-inclusive concentration, not an exclusive concentration. But this all-inclusive concentration is not an easy thing to do at once. In one go, we cannot arrive at it. We need to progressively move towards it. But even though the concentration of all the being on the divine is the character of the yoga, character of the integral yoga, concentration of all the being on the divine, yet is our being too complex a thing to be taken up easily and at once, as if we were taking up the world in a pair of hands and set it in its entirety to a single task. So there is quite some work to do. Man, in his effort at self-transcendence, has usually to seize on some one spring, some powerful leverage in the complicated machine that his nature is. So that's the thing to do. In that whole complicated machinery, we have to find a leverage point that will help us to transcend. So in his effort at self-transcendence, he usually seizes on some one or some powerful leverage, some one spring or some powerful leverage in the complicated machine that his nature is. This spring or lever he touches in preference to others. So out of the full possible range, we pick up one which gives the leverage in preference to others and uses it to set the machine in motion towards the end that he has in view. So different yogic schools have different end in view. The liberation spirituality looks at only reaching the God and renouncing the world, rejecting the world. That's their end in view. An integral approach has the view of integrating the world and looking at the evolutionary process in the world, the yoga of nature. Nature is very much part of integral yoga. So the end in view is different. Therefore, the selection of the spring or the leverage point will be accordingly. So in his choice, it is always nature itself that should be his guide. As we have already seen in the earlier chapters, it is the yoga of nature. The subconscious yoga of nature becoming conscious yoga in human being. Therefore, we are looking at nature herself as a guide to make that choice. What is that powerful leverage that we can utilize as a means to lift up to arrive at our goal? But here it must be the nature. It must be nature at her highest and widest in him, not at her lowest or in some limiting movement. We have already seen nature has multi-layered movement. There is a whole material, physical layer. There is a vital layer. There is a mental layer. These are all movements of nature. So of which what we need to look at is the highest and the widest, not the lowest or lower movements. For example, body is one of its very early stages of its evolutionary materialization of a particular form, and that's not necessarily our leverage point. We have to look at the highest and the widest. So here it must be nature at her highest and widest in him, not at her lowest or in some limiting movement. In her lower vital activities, it is desire that nature takes as her most powerful leverage. Desire. All the spiritual masters from the very early ancient days have observed desire is the biggest obstacle on the path. Nature has established desire as a principle, as a leverage to create the drive, the motivation in a living creature to look for its food, look for its mate, look for its life fulfillment. And that has transferred exactly into the human nature. And we too are driven by desire. Desire is our motivation, engine that drives all the objects of desire that attracts us, towards which we strive and struggle. Average human life is bound by that. That's the motive engine, the desire. Nature has been using that as her means to mobilize this creature. So in her lower vital activities, it is desire that nature takes as her most powerful leverage. But the distinct character of man is that he is a mental being, not merely vital creature. So this is what distinguishes man. We are not merely a vital creature, but we are mental beings. The animals are vital creatures, but we humans have this great freedom of the mind. We are mental beings. As he can use his thinking mind and will to restrain and correct his life impulses, so too he can bring in the action of a still higher luminous mentality, aided by the deeper soul in him, the psychic being, and supersede by these greater and purer motive powers the domination of the vital and sensational force that we call desire. So on one hand, it is perfectly possible for human being, because man is a mental being, to bring in the rational intelligence and its will to control the movements of desire. And that's what an average human being does, particularly the civilized man does, who brings the reason, brings the rational philosophies, brings the ethics, brings the logic, principles, policies to regulate otherwise animal impulsions that drive his life. So as he can use his thinking mind and will to restrain and correct his life impulses, that is really the first level. We can do that. So too, he can bring in the action of a still higher luminous mentality. So on one hand, we do have the possibility of mind and its will, but at the same time, there is something greater, a still higher and luminous mentality, aided by the deeper soul in him, the psychic being. So there is a luminous higher mentality which is aided by something deep within, the deeper soul in him, the psychic being, and supersede by these greater and purer motive powers. So these motive powers, they are motive powers. Just like desire is a motive power, this luminous mentality that is above our normal rational intelligence, as well as that which is deep in the heart, which aids this luminous intelligence. These two are purer motive powers. They are greater and purer motive powers. The domination of the vital and sensational force that we call desire. They can bring in the domination of the vital and sensational force that we call desire. So that's really the possibility he is pointing at. Animals are driven by their desire, animal instincts. We have the possibility of a rational intelligence, but beyond the rational intelligence, we have the possibility of bringing in a greater luminous mind above and deep within us, a soul that aids this luminous intelligence above. He can entirely master or persuade it and offer it up for transformation to its divine master. So, with the help of these higher faculties, it is perfectly possible to master and persuade desire and offer it up for transformation to its divine master. Master here is with capital M, the divine above, to whom this desire can be offered. We can master the desire, we can persuade it and offer it for transformation with the help of the faculties that are above normal rational intelligence, a luminous mind above, and the deeper soul within. This higher mentality and this deeper soul, the psychic element in man, are the two grappling hooks by which the divine can lay hold upon his nature. So, this is what he was gently nudging us towards. Which is the hook, which is the lever by which we can be lifted up? So, we need to find some leverage point. And he is suggesting these are the two leverage points: the luminous mind above, the deeper soul within. With these two, with the support of these two, we can lift ourselves up into the higher possibility of our spiritual evolution. So, this higher mentality and deeper soul, and this deeper soul, the psychic element in man, are the two grappling hooks by which the divine can lay hold upon his creature. So now we know these are really the hooks with which we can move forward on the path. The higher mind in man is something other, loftier, purer, vaster, more powerful than the reason or logical intelligence. Our highest current faculty is the logical rational intelligence. Even that requires quite some training. For example, to be a scientist, you need to really chisel out your rational intelligence, capacity for unbiased observation, analysis, all that are possible with great deal of training. And that's our highest faculty as of now in our current evolutionary stage. But that which is above, the higher mind in man, is something other, loftier, purer, vaster, more powerful than the reason or logical intelligence. Now, this picture, it is possible only for a yogi who is looking at reality from a higher consciousness, who can give us this clue. Unless yogi experiences that higher realms, live from there, he cannot give such a statement. Sri Aurobindo is giving us this picture because he has established himself in that higher domain. So the higher mind in man is something other, loftier, purer, vaster, more powerful than the reason or logical intelligence. The animal is a vital and sensational being. Man, it is said, is distinguished from the animal by the possession of reason. So what makes us human is this particular faculty of rational intelligence that can go beyond even the senses. Whereas animals are sensational beings living by that drive, that guidance. But that is a very summary, a very imperfect and misleading account of the matter. That is to say that what makes us different from animal is our rational intelligence. It is just a summary, and in fact an imperfect and misleading account of the matter. Why is Sri Aurobindo says it is a misleading fact? Let's see. For reason is only a particular and limited utilitarian and instrumental activity that proceeds from something much greater than itself, from a power that dwells in an ether more luminous, wider, and illimitable. This is where the yogic poise gives that vision. When we look from below, from our rational intelligence level, we cannot see this higher luminous ether. Only a yogi who has ascended to those levels can make a statement like this, because our sensory reality and our experience of rational intelligence has nothing visible of this higher nature. But a yogi who has ascended has seen it, therefore he can make such a statement. So he is saying reason is only a particular and limited utilitarian and instrumental activity. A particular and limited utilitarian and instrumental activity that proceeds from something much greater than itself. Reason is proceeding from something greater than itself. The very source of rational intelligence and its operational possibility, it comes from something beyond. And a yogi can see that. Proceeds from something much greater than itself, from a power that dwells in an ether more luminous, wider, and illimitable. Ether. Ether is the container of all things, Akasha. Power that dwells in an ether more luminous, wider, and illimitable. Where it is dwelling is something that is more luminous, wider, and illimitable than what we know in our human experience as rational intelligence. It's buddhi. There's a higher possibility. The true and ultimate, as distinguished from the immediate or intermediate importance of our observing, reasoning, inquiring, judging intelligence, is that it prepares the human being for the right reception and right action of a light from above, which must progressively replace in him the obscure light from below that guides the animal. The obscure light from below that guides the animal, and there is a light above which can be received into the human instrument, the rational intelligence. And this rational intelligence is only a preparation, an intermediate step. It has an intermediate importance only. So the very function of this is preparing us towards that greater possibility. From a yogic view, there is this evolution coming from below, from the complete inconscient. Out of that, matter emerges. Out of matter, life emerges. Out of life, mind emerges. And it's a light that is obscured by matter, wrapped in matter, and it is pushing the evolution. And in human beings, you become self-reflective, self-aware. But it is an evolution from below, a guidance from below, a light from below, which is guiding the animal. In human being, it becomes conscious. But even when we develop the rational intelligence, perfect it, it is still an intermediate instrumentation. And it is only preparing us to open to the light from above, which is the very source of the light below. It's actually come from above. The true and ultimate, as distinguished from the immediate or intermediate importance of our observing, reasoning, inquiring, judging intelligence. That's the nature of our intelligence. It can observe, it can reason, it can inquire, it can judge. These are all possibilities of our rational intelligence. So, of our observing, reasoning, inquiring, judging intelligence is that it prepares the human being. All that it is doing is preparing. We are getting prepared. Prepares the human being for the right reception and right action. Reception and action of a light from above. Here, light is with capital L. There is a divine light from above that can be received into this instrumentation, which must progressively replace in him the obscure light from below that guides the animal. So this light from above has to progressively replace the light from below, which is guiding the animal nature. And reason is that intermediate step. And it has to learn to open to the light from above. The latter also has a rudimentary reason. Here, we are referring to the animal, who is guided by light from below. The latter also has a rudimentary reason, a kind of thought, a soul, a will, and keen emotions. So animals have all this: keen emotions, a will, a soul, kind of thought, a rudimentary reason, all that is there. However, even though less developed, its psychology is yet the same in kind as man's. So the psychology of animal is quite same as animal, though it is less developed than what we have developed, particularly in the domain of reasoning intelligence. That is where we have taken a huge leap and differentiated ourselves from the animal. Animal has it in a similar way, but less developed. The latter also has a rudimentary reason, a kind of thought, a soul, a will, and keen emotions. Even though less developed, its psychology is yet the same in kind as man's. But all these capacities in the animal are automatically moved and strictly limited, almost even constituted by the lower nervous being. So all its will, rudimentary reason, its emotions, all these are controlled and limited by lower nervous being. That's what happens to animals. They operate within a strict limits and in a very predictable pattern. And they are controlled by it, and there is an automation of their operations. So all these capacities in the animal are automatically moved and strictly limited, almost even constituted by the lower nervous being. All animal perceptions, sensibilities, activities are ruled by nervous and vital instincts, cravings, needs, satisfactions, of which the nexus is the life impulse and vital desire. So animals are fully under this life impulse and vital desire. Their perceptions, sensibilities, activities. Perceptions, sensibilities, activities are ruled by nervous and vital instincts, cravings, needs, and satisfactions, of which the nexus is life impulse and vital desires. Man too is bound, but less bound. That's the difference. Man too is bound just like animals, but less bound. There is a certain level of freedom with which we can override this life instincts and impulses to this automatism of the vital nature. We do have that great deal of automation within us, but we can become self-aware and liberate ourselves from this automation. Man can bring an enlightened will, an enlightened thought, and enlightened emotions to the difficult work of his self-development. So that's clearly the possibility in us, to bring in an enlightened will, enlightened thought, enlightened emotions to the difficult work of his self-development. Developing inwardly is difficult, yet into that space we can truly bring in enlightened will, thought, and emotions. He can more and more subject to these more conscious and reflecting guides the inferior function of desire. So the movement and impulses and demands of desire and drive by desire can be brought under this greater guidance of the enlightened will, thought, and emotions, and begin to guide and shape them. In proportion as he can master and enlighten his lower self, he is man and no longer an animal. So, the distinction between man and an animal is this. It is to the degree to which we are able to master the desire and its impulses and guide them. Only to that degree we are a human being. But if we look at the life of a large number of people, it is pretty much driven by desire and pretty much like animals. So there is a mentalized animal kind of existence. Then out of that emerges a true man who is able to bring in his ethical reasoning and principles to govern the law of the addiction, the compulsion of the desire, and regulate it. And there comes the mental culture, civilization, all that. But it is still man who has emerged out of the animal. So, in proportion as he can thus master and enlighten his lower self, he is man and no longer an animal. When he can begin to replace desire altogether by a still greater enlightened thought and sight and will, in touch with the infinite, consciously subject to a diviner will than his own, linked to a more universal and transcendent knowledge, he has commenced the ascent towards the Superman. He is on his upward march towards the divine. So here we have the three distinct possibilities. One is entirely driven by desire, living like an animal. Then using our rational intelligence, we are mental beings, we can develop our rational intelligence and its ethical consideration and becoming truly human. Then opening to that greater light from above, aligning with its will, aligning with its light, its knowledge, and surrendering to it, opening to that, letting it transform the desire altogether, the animal nature in us and its impulsions altogether. That is when we are beginning to ascend to Superman, into a greater spiritual possibility within us to divinize ourselves. So we need to truly go beyond the rational intelligence and its will and come in touch with that two internal leverage points. One is the soul deep within, other is the luminous mentality above. These are the two leverage points by which we can lift ourselves up. So when he can begin to replace desire altogether by a still greater enlightened thought and sight and will, enlightened thought, sight and will. There is a vision that comes from above and a will that comes from above, even a thought that comes from above, that is in touch with the infinite, consciously subject to a diviner will than his own. So subjecting ourselves to a diviner will, linked to a more universal and transcendent knowledge. So this greater will, greater knowledge, coming from above, universal and transcendent, it is in proportion to that he has commenced the ascent towards the Superman. He is on his upward march towards the divine. So that's the invitation that is upon us, to open beyond the rational intelligence to the greater illumined, greater mind above and the soul within, and replacing the movement of desire and transforming it. It is then in the highest mind of thought and light and will, the highest mind of thought and light and will, or it is in the inner heart of deepest feeling and emotion, that we must first center our consciousness. Our consciousness is centered in the outer being, particularly the outer mind. Physical location-wise, we can almost say it is in our forehead. That's where the self-reflective center of our being normally is dwelling. It is a very much outer center. From there, we need to shift the center, and we have two options. One is lifting it above into the luminous mentality above, or shifting it deep within the heart into the psychic being, the soul within. These are the two points and two places where we need to shift the center of our being. center of our consciousness. So it is then in the highest mind of thought and light and will, or it is in the inner heart of deepest feeling and emotion that we must first center our consciousness. In either of them, or if we are capable, in both together. So for some people, it is easy to go deep into the heart and find that center and start living from there. For some, it is easy to go upward into the higher mind centers and live from there. Ideally, we must be shifting into both because they work together to bring in the transformation. But we start with what is naturally possible, naturally inclined. But the best option is to have both these centers getting established and use that as our leverage to lift the nature wholly towards the divine. It is by centering in these 2 points, instead of being on the outer center, we will be able to successfully lift ourselves into the divine nature. It is then in the highest mind of thought and light and will, or it is in the inner heart of deepest feeling and emotion that we must first center our consciousness. In either of them, or if we are capable, in both together, and use that as our leverage to lift the nature wholly towards the divine. Wholly, the entire nature has to be lifted up. The concentration of an enlightened thought, will, and heart turned in unison towards one vast goal of our knowledge, one luminous and infinite source of our action, one imperishable object of our emotion, is the starting point of the yoga. So this is how we start our yoga. You see, it's a deeply psycho-spiritual method. It's not a physical exercise. It is inner movement he is talking about. The concentration of an enlightened thought, will, and heart turned in unison. They are not operating in separation. Thought, will, and heart, the emotion. They are working in unison towards one vast goal of our knowledge. The goal of our knowledge. What is the purpose of knowledge? Knowledge can be turned outwardly to know about the world and its operations and its details of technicalities. That's one type of knowledge, worldly knowledge. But here we are looking at the goal of our knowledge is to discover the divine source. The goal of our knowledge, one luminous and infinite source of our action. Our normal action is driven by desire. But behind the desire and above all this and deep within, there is a divine source. And it is from there everything proceeds. So we need to turn into that source of all our action, one imperishable object of our emotions. Our human emotion seeks its intimacy, its connection, its affection, its need for love. But it is transient. The human emotions, human love, the experience of love, it is transient. It will come and go. It is very perishable. Whereas there is an imperishable object of our emotion, that is the divine love, beauty, and delight. And it is towards that we need to turn. And that turning is the starting point of yoga. A fully concentrated turning towards these possibilities, that's where the yoga begins. And the object of our seeking must be the very fount of the light which is growing within us, growing in us. The very origin of the force which we are calling to move our members. There's a light that is growing within us. And there's a source of this light, the very fount of it. And all our movements animated by an original source, original force. It is towards that we are turning. So the object of our seeking must be the very fount of the light which is growing in us. So what we are seeking is that source from where the light that is growing in us and the force which we are calling in to move our members. All our thought, emotions, actions, everything is to be moved by that one force. Our one objective must be the divine himself, to whom, knowingly or unknowingly, something always aspires in our secret nature. There is a secret deep nature in us who seeks the divine. But the word divine may still be abstract to many people. But if you look in terms of what you truly seek, you may be seeking for freedom. You may seek love. You may seek delight. You may seek knowledge. You may seek truth. You may seek goodness. You may seek beauty. These are all aspects of the divine. Something deep within us seeks freedom. Something deep within us seeks truth. Something deep within us seeks beauty. That movement is arising from the deepest soul within us. So our objective must be the divine himself, to whom, knowingly or unknowingly, something always aspires in our secret nature. Whether we know it or not, something in us that is veiled is always seeking. The more we are able to recognize it, open to it consciously, support it, the faster our progress will be on the path. There must be a large, many-sided, yet single concentration of the thought. Many-sided, yet a single concentration of the thought on the idea. So the different sides of that concentration, all-inclusive concentration. The idea, the perception, the vision, the awakening touch. The soul's realization of the one divine. So in idea, in perception, in vision, and awakened touch, these are all that gathering up for the soul's realization of the one divine. So there must be a large, many-sided, yet single concentration of thought on the idea, the perception, the vision, the awakened touch, the soul's realization of the one divine. There must be a flaming concentration of the heart. Flaming concentration of the heart. Flame brings the imagery of that yajna, the flame of aspiration, the yearning, the deepest yearning of the heart, which can burn through all the obstacles, all the difficulties. There must be a flaming concentration of the heart. Heart's emotions, instead of getting scattered in the outer world and its demands and needs, gathered up into that deep, intense yearning for the divine union. That flaming intensity, that flaming concentration of the heart on the seeking of the all and eternal. And when once we have found him, a deep plunging and immersion in the possession and ecstasy of the all beautiful. That's the picture. All beautiful. The divine is Satchidananda. The nature is at deepest depth, blissfully conscious. It is into that blissfully conscious existence we are to immerse and merge. And if we are to seek the divine, we have to seek in that aspect or this integral vision of the divine as all beautiful, not as a qualityless void that we are seeking, but this all beautiful, immanent, all pervasive, and transcendent, universal divine. So there must be a flaming concentration of the heart on the seeking of the all and eternal. And when once we have found him, a deep plunging and immersion. Really, we need to experientially plunge and immerse in that reality and let it infuse and permeate the entire substance of our being, the physical substance, vital substance, mental substance, our thoughts, our emotions, our body, everything getting infused with it. It is that which will transform. A deep plunging and immersion in the possession and ecstasy of the all beautiful. Amazing, isn't it? That's the picture Sri Aurobindo is painting for us. There must be a strong and immovable concentration. Immovable concentration. Our normal, untrained mind is mobile. It is jumping from one thing to other all the time. From there, we need to develop this immovable concentration of the will on the attainment and fulfillment. The entire will, from its scattered, fractured nature, integrate them, gather them up, and make them immovable concentration of the will on the attainment and fulfillment of that the divine is. And a free and plastic opening of it to all that he intends to manifest in us. So it is the divine who is manifesting into this instrumental nature. As we have already seen, the human nature is complex. And beyond the individual mold, there is this whole collective and universal dimensions, not just physical dimension, but also subtle physical and vital and mental dimensions. And quite some opposition to the transformation. And this cannot be done by human will and its limited knowledge and effort, capacity. But when we turn all our thought, will, energies, everything into a single-minded pursuit, and to hold these two centers, one deep in the heart and one luminous center above, together, there is the transformation, so that the divine light and force can pour into the instrument and transform it. So it's not our smartness and capacity that enables this transformation, but the pouring in of the light and force of the divine that enables us to transform all the difficulties which otherwise is so complex, so vast, so impossible for human mind to deal with. So there must be a strong and immovable concentration of the will on the attainment and fulfillment of all that the divine is, and a free and plastic opening to it. So how do we open ourselves to it so that to be receptive and plastic for it to pour down and mold and reshape us? So a free and plastic opening to it, to all that he intends to manifest in us. There is a divine intention, there is a divine will that knows that this particular instrument is capable of manifesting this or that, which will be revealed to the instrument. You are meant to do this, and transform accordingly. So that's the possibility we are looking at. This is the triple way of the yoga. Triple way is, it includes way of knowledge, way of love, way of the will, action. All that is brought together and gathered, concentrated effort, where we move from the outer center to the inner center, deep in the heart, or the luminous mind above, or together. And there is a reception of the higher into the lower, the divine consciousness into our limited mold, which will transform each instrument, purify and elevate and harmonize with every other instrument, integrate everything into a grand symphony of the divine play, divine delight by that which is all beautiful. And with that picture, now we are coming to the end of this episode. So on one hand, we see the enormous complexity of human nature. on the other hand, we see the light and force that can actually transform it. It's not our human will. It's not our limited human knowledge. Therefore, in yoga, we have this whole attempt to come in touch with the divine light and force so that it can enter, purify, and transform the human nature. So please do share your insights, your journey, your experiences so that it can be of value to others who are listening, others who are going through, who can also read through the comments that you would be making. And traveling together, learning from each other, it's a pure learning space. So let's all travel together in the light of Sri Aurobindo, immersing in this book, wonderful book, with its detailed exposition of the process of yoga. And I gladly invite you all to immerse in this all beautiful beloved who is ever present in all things, who is behind all things and above all things, and to whom we have to offer all that we are, and who will pour into us and transform us. Thank you for being with me. See you next week.